So I ran into some technical difficulties earlier, so I just went through a literal reboot of everything, and hopefully it'll work this time. I'm using real old computer, and there's really no shoestring budget I'm working with here. You know what I'm saying? But I'm glad that I had a couple people join us last time when I did launch the original show. But let's take a look here. See if we can get the camera to work this time. YouTube didn't get the camera, but Facebook got the camera. All right, now got YouTube, Facebook. Everybody's got a camera. It should be working now. All right, so I want to thank you for taking a look at the Boyd podcast. In the background, you hear Sephiroth Beats, the dopest beats, as per usual. My intro track, I can't remember what the actual name of that is, but he has an album out, and you should definitely go cop it. All right, so I guess I don't even remember what I was really talking about before I had technical difficulties, but I think what I do want to discuss real quick is the fact that, I'm talking about on the show, it's all about dialogue. And you know what? I wonder if some of my problems is if I'm having some network problems here. I'm not real happy with AT&T lately. I'm trying to watch TV, trying to watch Stranger Things. Anybody on Stranger Things? If you're on Stranger Things, hit me up in the comments. Tell me you're on Stranger Things. Anyway, I didn't think I would like Stranger Things that much. This season, I'm like, I'm not as keen on it as I was last season. And I don't really know why, but it just is so. And right now, sorry, pardon my gaze averting elsewhere. I'm trying to manage. We got a couple streams going on right now, Facebook and YouTube. I would suggest you follow the YouTube link YouTube link on the Facebook, so you could subscribe, and also you could check the archives because there are some. I think maybe even Facebook has archives if you look at my videos section. It's maybe something like that. And I'll just warn you, they're not edited. There's between the hustling and the grinding and then the sleeping here and there. This is sort of like, as Bruce Lee would say, like water. It's like you put it into the teacup, it becomes the teacup. You put it into a teapot, it becomes the teapot. That's sort of like I'm trying to fit this into the cracks, which unfortunately means old computer, old stuff. I think I first tried to start this old computer. How old is this computer? It's old. I think it's like 10 years old. Corporate refurbished computer that I'm streaming from. And I tried to boot it up after moving from here to Virginia and back again. Try to boot it up initially and it wouldn't boot up. And I was like, what's going on? It turned out the RAM sticks had like popped out. So crazy stuff. Anyway, so that might be part of the problem too. So far we talked yesterday, last episode I was talking about trolling the Atlas Society. And when I say trolling, I'm not really I'm not trying to just do anything in bad faith. They think I do, because I'll tell you why. Because I'm sort of a jerk sometimes, but usually not too much of a jerk. I don't like to just start off on the jerk foot. You know what I mean? But sometimes I'm like, these guys, they're so smug and so arrogant in their ignorance. It's crazy. And you might say, well, maybe you're ignorant. Maybe you're the one that's so arrogant in the Dunning-Kruger, the loudest idiot in the, because the idiots are always the loudest people in the room, and the people who understand how hard it is to do something, right? So I just mentioned the Dunning-Kruger effect. Dang it, I forgot. I knew I was forgetting some whiteboard. Dunning-Kruger effect. All right, so for my audio only listeners, you're not going to be able to see this, but so let's take a look at what Dunning-Kruger effect is. So you could look it up, but I'm just going to pop it up on our screen real quick. And so Dunning-Kruger effect is something that was described by two doctors, Dunning and Kruger. I can't remember their first names. But it's basically about cognitive dissonance, right, and bias. And you know what? Maybe let's just do this. Maybe TED Talks is. Hopefully I'm not doing a copyright violation. 1 second.
Are you as good at things as you think you are? How good are you at managing money? What about reading people's emotions? How healthy are you compared to other people you know? Are you better than average at grammar? Knowing how competent we are and how our skills stack up against other people's is more than a self-esteem boost. It helps us figure out when we can forge ahead on our own decisions and instincts, and when we need instead to seek out advice. But psychological research suggests that we're not very good at evaluating ourselves accurately. In fact, we frequently overestimate our own abilities. Researchers have a name for this phenomenon, the Dunning-Kruger effect. This effect explains why more than 100 studies have shown that people display illusory superiority. We judge ourselves as better than others to a degree that violates the laws of math. When software engineers at two companies were asked to rate their performance, 32% of the engineers at one company and 42% at the other put themselves in the top 5%. In another study, 88% of American drivers described themselves as having above average driving skills. These aren't isolated findings. On average, people tend to rate themselves better than most in disciplines ranging from health, leadership skills, ethics, and beyond. What's particularly interesting is that those with the least ability are often the most likely to overrate their skills to the greatest extent. People measurably poor at logical reasoning, grammar, financial knowledge, math, emotional intelligence, running medical lab tests, and chess all tend to rate their expertise almost as favorably as actual experts do. So who's most vulnerable to this delusion? Sadly, all of us, because we all have pockets of incompetence we don't recognize. But why? When psychologists Dunning and Kruger first described the effect in 1999, they argued that people lacking knowledge and skill in particular areas suffer a double curse. First, they make mistakes and reach poor decisions. But second, those same knowledge gaps also prevent them from catching their errors. In other words, poor performers lack the very expertise needed to recognize how badly they're doing. For example, when the researchers studied participants in a college debate tournament, the bottom 25% of teams in preliminary rounds lost nearly 4 out of every 5 matches. But they thought they were winning almost 60%. Without a strong grasp of the rules of debate, the students simply couldn't recognize when or how often their arguments broke down. The Dunning-Kruger effect isn't a question of ego blinding us to our weaknesses. People usually do admit their deficits once they can spot them. In one study, students who had initially done badly on a logic quiz and then took a mini course on logic were quite willing to label their original performances as awful. That may be why people with a moderate amount of experience or expertise often have less confidence in their abilities. They know enough to know that there's a lot they don't know. Meanwhile, experts tend to be aware of just how knowledgeable they are, but they often make a different mistake. They assume that everyone else is knowledgeable too. The result is that people, whether they're inept or highly skilled, are often caught in a bubble of inaccurate self-perception. When they're unskilled, they can't see their own faults. When they're exceptionally competent, they don't perceive how unusual their abilities are. So if the Dunning-Kruger effect is invisible to those experiencing it, what can you do to find out how good you actually are at various things? First, ask for feedback from other people and consider it, even if it's hard to hear. Second, and more important, keep learning. The more knowledgeable we become, the less likely we are to have invisible holes in our competence. Perhaps it all boils down to that old proverb: when arguing with a fool, first make sure the other person isn't doing the same thing. Did you enjoy this lesson? If so, please consider supporting our nonprofit mission by visiting patreon.com.
Or TED-Ed, because I just used their, and they had their watermark on that thing. So, okay, let me get the camera back on. So that's, I mean, I'm glad we were able to see that, and that way you don't have to take my word for what Dunning-Kruger effect is. I mean, TED-Ed is I don't know, you guys trust TED-Ed's, sort of breakdown and simplification of what the Dunning-Kruger effect is from these doctors that studied it. So, that's a big deal. And I think that was a pretty, what's the word? That was a pretty powerful statement to say, when arguing with a fool, make sure that they're not doing the same on the flip side. So you have the Dunning-Kruger effect where people who really aren't very good at, anything or whatever, trying to, assert with the utmost confidence how much they know when in fact they really don't know. So let's take a look here. All right. So for my show, for instance, I would love to get some feedback from you guys and really get to understand what you guys want to talk about and what I can do to make the show better, because really, what's the show without people watching it? Right? And I'm not trying to make any money. It'd be cool to be able to make a living walking around talking to people and sharing their stories and asking them questions and really trying to dig down to some of these core social and economic issues that we face. And a lot of people, are out there already doing it. But, again, I'm trying to give my take on it. Sometimes I've got a different look at things that some folks don't share, right? So I'm trying to recognize that. So on one hand, it doesn't sound like I'm being humble, but I'm seeking out. I'm in a way picking fights with the Atlas Society because I want to see what I can get from them. What I can get, so if I get put in my place from an argument, then now I can be like, oh, okay, great. Now I know I feel like I've been out hunting for monsters, and they've just been too easy to slay. I'll tell you, they're too easy to slay. And it's getting boring, and I want to really see what is out there as far as people who really have a real argument. And what's crazy is Dunning-Kruger effect really affects a lot of these libertarians out there. They really haven't done any reading. They haven't done any research on a critique of their position. They aren't open to it. They're very closed-minded, and they exhibit some of the most massive Dunning-Kruger effect that I've ever witnessed. And I was like that. And I think I can recognize that because I've seen that in myself, and I feel like I can do the verbal jujitsu that I need to with some of these folks because they are saying the same things that I used to say, and I've debunked myself, and I have the positions that I have now because I've analyzed these things, and I don't believe these folks have really analyzed their position. And the crazy thing is that the crazy thing about the Atlas Society, because they're Ayn Rand fans, and that's if you've read Ayn Rand, it's all about the individual, very self. I'll even say there are memes that they post talking about literally selfishness as a virtue, and I wholeheartedly disagree. And it's not just because I feel this in my heart or I feel like, oh, that's not how it should be. No, evidence, science, the history of humankind, of hominids, is a history of cooperation, right? Because even the other apes, if you want to go that far, as the related animals that would fill the same niche that we did in the pre-human period. If you want to talk about that, we all descended from a common ancestor. I'm not going to get into cladistics right now. A lot of people have misnomers or misunderstandings of how evolution is theorized to work. Not even theorized. It's DNA proves it pretty much. It's done now. So it's tantamount to fact. We can't necessarily see macro species evolution through watching it happen, but we can see DNA evidence. Anyway, this isn't a story about evolution. This is, I don't even know what I was talking about. Anyway, the reason I go, hold on one second. I'm getting a message from YouTube. Let me see. Oh, maybe because I played the TED thing in there. We'll see what happens. Anyway, what was I saying? So we have the Dunning-Kruger effect. These guys don't want to even look at a real critique of their position. And that's the thing that put me where I am now, is that I realized the position that I had as basically a libertarian was hogwash. It was just as much hogwash as creating, in the next couple years, creating a communist society per Marxist communism, right? So Marxist communism, unlike the propaganda, unlike the ramblings of people who've never read Marx, like you actually got to read Marx, right? If you read Marx, Marx is saying, look, no state. There is no state. There is no class, right? So it's anarchy, basically. But we all understand that we are living together and to be harmonious with the earth, with each other, with all that's around us, because we're like on this, it's like a gigantic spaceship floating through the universe, right? So what would you, like, if you're in your car and you're on a road trip, are you going to take shits in the back seat? You're going to piss all over the place, in on the floor? You probably wouldn't, but that's sort of like okay. For some reason, that seems okay for us to be doing, it's like, yeah, sure, we can manage our own, like, physical, biological waste to a large degree. But, industrial waste, stuff like most people wouldn't care about, let me take it back. By now, a lot of people wouldn't just throw trash out in the world. At least, I see some assholes do it every once in a while, but now you get to the point now where people will literally like pick up. I've seen, people, you probably seen new YouTube videos, right? Where people will actually see someone littering and pick up the trash and like throw it back in their car and shit like that. That's the kind of stuff we're starting to see more and more in our society. And most of us are willing to, like, we wouldn't go take like our old used oil after we changed our oil and go dump it in a waterway. And most of us wouldn't do that unless you're like a sociopath or something like that. You wouldn't go and do something like that. And yet industrial corporations and, anybody, the oil and gas industry, pharmaceutical industry, clothing industry, any industry, pollutes, dumps chemicals, dumps waste, dumps all sorts of stuff out into the world, dumps gases like carbon dioxide, methane, any other pollutants, whatever it is, dumping it out into the basically a gigantic vessel, which is where we live. And there's got to be a point where that causes problems. I mean, just if you understand chaos theory or ever heard of chaos theory, where, you know, one of the more extreme examples of chaos theory is the butterfly effect, right? You guys heard of the butterfly effect, right? The idea, the notion that under the right conditions, under the right circumstances, with all the right positive interference, with all of everything coalescing together in perfect harmony, the single wing beat of a butterfly in South America can turn into a catastrophic typhoon in Japan, right? And under chaos theory, that events happen and we can't predict every single thing that happens. There's an element of chaos in everything, right? And so how long can we expect to disrupt a system, right, that works together, like the ecosystem works together? Some of them are more fragile than others. Nature is more resilient in some ways than others, and in certain places it's more resilient, etc. So we can't 100% blanket everything, but there are some places that are very fragile, and it's not hippie shit. It's not like some tinfoil hat shit. When a certain species dies, the whole shit collapses. Like the dodo died on the island of Mauritius. The Mauritian olive, right? The native olive that only lives on that fucking island is now going to go extinct. When those trees die, there will be no more, I'm pretty sure it's an olive, no more Mauritian olives. Whatever, from the island of Mauritius or whatever, right? Where the dodo was. So if you know what the dodo was a real bird. Look it up if you don't believe me. I wouldn't feed you bullshit. The whole thing about the Boyd is there's no fucking bullshit. It's real shit. So look up the dodo. It's a relative of the pigeon, flightless. Pirates found the island of Mauritius. They were out on the ship, whatever. They're eating salt cod and salt pork or some shit, and they're tired of that shit. They see some fresh meat, right? This is a 3-foot fucking tall pigeon looking, didn't look like a pigeon, 3-foot tall pigeon relative that couldn't fly and was dumb. That's why they called it the dodo. Right? They call it the dodo. And so they go around clubbing these motherfuckers and they're like, yo, let's take some for the road, yo. And they grab a whole fucking bunch of them. Turns out they don't really breed all that fast, right? And so eventually they kill all them motherfuckers gone, right? Now what? Turns out that the dodo had some special gastric shit going on. I don't know if it was the gastric juices, if it was a fucking, I don't know if it had special gizzard with like razors in it or some shit. I don't know. Go look it up. They'll tell you. Someone will tell you. But the husk of the seed, or the shell of the seed, cannot be penetrated any other way other than to go through the system of a fucking dodo. They evolved together. Now that the dodo is gone, the fucking olive is gone, right? And some people are like, well, you know what? The humans fucked up the world. And so the next era of evolution is who can survive humanity, right? And that's sort of like, I think that's pretty fucked up. Something that's been going on for millions and millions of years, at least as we dig shit up out of the fucking earth, we can see that stuff has been happening for a very long time. And then we show up and like massive percentages of living beings that use, basically DNA information that's self-perpetuated all the way till now are gone because we fucked up, because we have to shit and piss in our own vehicle, right? And that's like the end. And the fact that there's a whole segment of society that just can't see, like, we can't just keep fucking pushing shit into the world without the butterfly effect coming back to haunt us. If we put millions of tons of some gas, whatever fucking gas it is, if we put millions of anything, practically like tons of something, like lots of something, you can disrupt systems that way, right? And it's a tricky situation where Dunning-Kruger effect comes back in. You know, I had somebody tell me, oh, you know, this climate change shit's all hoo-ha because, you know, one volcano will erupt and dump out more CO2 than all of humans, right? And, you know, I was like, you know, that sounds interesting. I'm going to look it up. Simple Google search. Actually, we'll do it. You guys can do it. Look it up later. Or maybe we can. Either way, I'm going to try to tell you while I'm looking it up if I can. But yeah, it's they were trying to say, oh well, just one eruption does more, dispersion of CO2 into the atmosphere than all of humanity. And so I'm like, you know what, that sounds like bullshit to me. So I'm going to go look it up. And according to the U.S. Geological Survey, in fact, let's go take a look at this. Let me change this up. See, now some of you guys, if you are in the Duval area and you want to be part of a podcast and help do some live engineering and production, there's a place for you on the Boyd. You don't get paid. You got to do it for love. All right. So here we go. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, USGS, the world's volcanoes, both on land and undersea, so all those thermal vents spewing out all this hot ass gas with those worms and shit living down there, right, generate about 200 million tons of carbon dioxide. Now, this is a U.S. Geological Survey. They fucking survey this shit, right, annually. Our automotive and industrial activities cause some 24 billion tons of CO2 emissions every year worldwide. So annually, 200 million, right? And remember, what's a billion? It's 1,000 million, right? So we are looking at what, 100 times, or no, more than, I don't know. Someone do the math. We're looking at extremely more, an extreme amount that we're putting out compared to the volcano, the naturally occurring volcano. So it's a line of bullshit to people who literally have the Dunning-Kruger effect so hardcore that they're not willing to see past, or not willing to even look up the shit that they're spouting, because they don't want to be proven wrong. They would rather have the cognitive bias make them feel like they were right than to ever look up what something really was. You know, for me, it was when I first read Adam Smith, got slapped in the face. I was like, what? This is totally different than The Economist, or at least the people that I talked to that knew about the economy would recall Adam Smith. And I was like, this is bullshit. So I started reading more stuff. So I questioned and challenged myself, right? And I was like, damn, I've been wrong this whole time. God, I feel so stupid. Well, you know what? Only a few people out there really ever got deep into economics and whatever to a degree where, and I lament this to some degree, because I wonder if someone had challenged my notions, would I have come to these conclusions later, and would I have been open to them? That's the other question. So one of my questions is, how do you reach through people with Dunning-Kruger effect, for instance, where they think they're the experts, right? Like, it's like everybody thinks everyone else is a shitty driver and they're pretty good. But by like mathematical definition, guess what? You're fucking average. Yeah, probably. Because by definition, the chances are you're an average. Now, maybe something sets you apart and you're highly skilled, or maybe you're terrible, right? And you're on the other side of the bell curve. But literally, most people, by definition, are average, right? So when you hear people say stuff like, oh, democracy is mob rule, well, fucking guess what? You are part of the mob. So, yeah, wouldn't it be better for the mob to rule than for like some people who manipulated power to rule? Like Bernays, when I talked about Bernays, the author of Propaganda, 1913 when that book came out. It's a short book. Go read it. I'm telling you, it illuminates a a societal phenomenon where you have a group of people who feel like they are the elite people who see the world and can control the world. And then there's a bunch of sort of ruffians who are there for your extractive purposes to use as your will. And they're the ones that need the guidance. They need you to tell them what to do. Right? Now, do you believe that? If you believe that, then okay, then let's choose some leaders to tell us what to do. But would you 100% trust them to just tell you what to do and follow that? You know, the irony is you see a lot of these Trump guys out there, and they are simultaneously anti-government, super like almost anarchistic, right? And they don't want someone telling them what to do. But then Trump can do and say anything, and they will do what Trump says. And Trump is the figurehead of the state, and they practically worship the guy and his administration and what he does via the apparatus of the state. So it's like the Schrodinger's conservative simultaneously hating the state while loving the state, right? And this is really people, it sounds hyperbolic, it sounds like I'm exaggerating, but this is the doorway, the gateway to fascism, right? Do you see how that's illuminated or illustrated? Because on one hand, you have this sort of line of dialogue that's a cover that's saying, oh, well, we believe in freedom, liberty, da, 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 unless our guy, supreme leader, says it, in which case you should fall in line. Because guess what? He's your president, motherfucker. Deal with it. And you better fall in line. And they will support state action against you, even though they hate the state. How many of them are totally fine with police action against Trump supporters, or police action against libtards, or police action against someone who they think is not like them, or they don't like, or whatever, a thug, right? Whoever that is. And that is totally fine. So state acting in that way is totally fine. So it turns it up on its end where they're like, on one side of their face, they're like, oh, we should have practically anarchy, no state, no nothing. We should have full liberty to do what we individually want, right? Unless the state apparatus is headed by my person, in which case now all shit can break loose and you can go do what the fuck you want. I guarantee, I don't doubt one fucking iota that if the administration started actually culling some of the immigrant detainees, I think there would be people justifying it. Because I mean, if you haven't done it, if you haven't tried it, and this includes right-wing people, if you're watching this, go find some meme or some Facebook group or something that's a conservative group that has immigrant shit, like immigrant meme, anti-immigrant stuff, and look at the comments. Because I do it. Because I read it and I see them. And these motherfuckers talk about, well, why don't we just bring some of those A-10s over there? A couple strafing rounds and runs, and depleted uranium's going to stop those immigrants. Or like, hey, we got plenty of Patriot Second Amendment lovers that can come clean this mess up. Just tell us when, Trump. Like literally, they're willing to like create a massacre of women and children who have come and traveled however many miles, however long time. Right. And these same people, the same people will go to your face and tell you to your face straight with no blink that they will kill for their kids. Right. They would kill for their kids. Right. But if you dare cross a fucking border for your kids, oh, well, shit. Well, you don't deserve to be with them anymore. And yeah, we can put them in these cages and we can do whatever the fuck we want. And we can use the government teat to pay our capitalist friends who want to make money off of all the fucking taxpayers in the grift. All right, we got some comments. I want to go ahead and recognize some of the folks that are commenting. Thank you so much for joining, everybody that's joined and watching. Mark Nadala, what's up, Mark? Thanks so much for checking out the show. Mark's an old buddy of mine. Really cool dude. Real cool. Mark says, way to use your 300 credits of zoology. Yes, I spent a lot of time learning zoology. I was a zoology major back in the day. It was like back in the 90s. And I did learn quite a bit. One day, I may discuss the Rete Mirabila, the countercurrent exchange network system that keeps ducks' feet from freezing and also helps warm the brains of great white sharks. So Mark also said most people link studies that support their view. And that's the thing too. I'm going to introduce a new term that makes me think of something actually right now. Last episode, our word of the night was sycophant. Sycophant, someone like basically a kiss ass, someone who's a kiss ass for someone else. So you see like Blue Lives Matter, for instance, those Blue Line guys, the Blue Lives Matter people, those guys are cop sycophants. Does that make sense, right? They would kiss the ass of a cop. No matter what. So the cops could go kill a bunch of people. And it's like, well, you just don't understand what they go through. Like, man, I don't know, man. There's other ways that you can approach a situation. Like the classic, to me, one of the biggest ones was Tamir Rice, man, the 12-year-old kid fucking around in a park with a toy gun. I used to run around with toy guns, pistols. In Japan, I got these airsoft guns they didn't have fucking nothing for like an orange tip or shit like that. Looked like a Beretta, looked like a Beretta. A Walther looked like a Walther. I mean, 1911, straight up 1911. Even had fucking lead. You had to assemble these things. It had lead bricks inside to make it feel hefty. You know what I mean? And I can't imagine that the police rolled up and just shot me within 2 seconds of showing up. 2 seconds of showing up if I was 12. And I used to do that. And it's crazy to me that people justify, oh, you don't understand what the police been through. Well, if I died, is that justify the police been through some shit? So it's okay. James died. It's okay. So I can't believe it that people, or that they couldn't come up with a better way to like, oh, how about this? Well, let's go hide somewhere and use our bullhorn and say, you with the gun, drop it. I mean, even RoboCop did more fucking, it had better rules of the fucking engagement than our own human flesh and blood cops. But, because either the media or racism or classism or whatever fucking ism you want to put in it has dehumanized people to the point where they're not even fucking human to these people anymore. They would just as soon kill them as they would kill anything else that they just take pleasure in killing. Or they're so fucking scared they're killing people. They get them to get their shook ass off the streets. You know what I mean? Why the fuck are they on the streets? If they're that scared, get the fuck off. This is not a job for you. Not a job for you. Like if you're super scared and antisocial and you can't talk to people, you know what? Don't go into fucking telemarketing. That's a bad move, right? Or like you don't have a very good vocabulary and you can barely talk. Don't go into communication, right? Those are bad fits. If you have a temper and you can't control it, if you are jumpy and you want to shoot anybody that scares you a little bit, then get the fuck out the force. Go get a desk job. If you just want to wear the uniform, hey, I'm sure there's something you can do pushing papers so you're not shooting up motherfuckers in the park, and then mothers don't lose their sons and sisters don't lose their brothers, or like Sandra Bland, for a fucking non-issue, it turns into fucking death. How fucking stupid. This is stupid. We pay these motherfuckers. I'm on a rant. Anyway, off topic. Here we go. Mark was saying most people link studies that support their views. And that's true because a lot of it comes back to that, right. And he was responding to Dunning-Kruger and the cognitive bias that we're seeing. And especially now in the age of information, people say, in the age, or I've seen a meme actually floating around talking about in the age of information, ignorance is a choice. And I wholeheartedly disagree with that because the classic example that refutes that is in the awesome movie Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. We have Jade Fox, who cannot read the manuscript, but only can see the pictures. And so access to that information does not eliminate ignorance. If you have the codes, or excuse me, the blueprints to some nuclear facility, but you don't know how to read blueprints, and you don't have the mental acuity to bring this abstract thing that's just a thing on paper into physical fruition, then you're still ignorant, right? It's still not something that works, or not works, but it basically might as well not exist, right? So access to information does not negate or dispel ignorance. It simply gives you access to information. So to that end, we are facing an epistemological crisis. And what does that mean? Here I got the definition up for my viewers who are joining us live or in the archives. For those audio only, have the definition for epistemological, or from epistemology, right? So what is that? It's spelled epistemological, epistemological, right? Adjective, relating to the theory of knowledge, especially with regard to its methods, validity, and scope, and the distinction between justified belief and opinion, right? We face an epistemological crisis. Mark brings up this point that illuminates this in a real world sense. How many times have you seen somebody who has a different, political take than you, or something like that, and they give you some stupid ass study that is full of bullshit? Oh, whoops. Oh, I got infinity screen. Hold on a second, guys. Get my camera back on. That's what we're talking about as far as, that cognitive bias. Instead of seeing what's out there and what your sources are they valid sources? Are they legitimate? Instead of doing that, they just sort of take whatever resonates with them the best at face value. And there's a difference between people that are out there doing this stuff, because some of these folks are definitely doing it in bad faith. They're not really trying to understand the world. They're just trying to, in their mind, win arguments, right? So when I go and troll the Atlas Society with a bunch of Ayn Rand people on it, I just want to insult them so bad. Like, they're so moronic. Like, but some people might be libertarian, Randian people that are watching. Look, don't be like that anymore. Stop, because you don't want, I'm telling you, if you really critically think about your position, it ends. You have to lie to yourself. You either have to advocate for genocide, you have to be okay with people dying on the street, you have to be okay with people dying from lack of being able to afford the necessities to live and have shelter and food and anything else. And so, because at the end of the day, that is the truth, because we've seen this happen. We see it happen in other parts of the world, in the contemporary. We've seen it happen in our own past, in the United States, as far as the labor struggles, etc. So, those are some of the worst folks. There's this gal on there, I'm guessing maybe a fake name, I don't know, that always tries to respond back to me on Atlas Society, and I always hold out faith and hope that they're going to come up with like this really strong argument. I'm like, oh shit, I'm going to have to like sit at a desk and really think this out. And I'm like, man, every time, what happens is this person will not actually research anything, right? So for instance, we were talking about, I go there on the Atlas Society and I talk shit on capitalism, and I advocate basically for market socialism, which is guaranteeing workers equity in the businesses that they build. Okay. Now you could say, well, how do they deserve any equity? Like, a shareholder pays money for these shares. I can sell them part of my business. I'm paying them money for their labor, so that's good enough. I'm like, no, I don't think so, because that labor, right? That labor is what you're paying for, but what you're not paying for is their time, because they can't get that back. And so that service they're providing you is something in which you're reaping a benefit on the back end, and you get to build additional assets based off of the extraction that you made with labor. Now, you could say, well, they could just find another job. Sure, but if all the capitalist systems or the businesses out there know that other people are paying some low wage because people are desperate enough to do it, they may or may not, depending on how desperate labor in general is, raise their wages. There's a reason why people were making so little back in the day, not just because of inflation. They were living in squalor. So the inflationary component doesn't matter. Like if you could buy a house for $5, but you're only getting paid, 1/100th of a cent per hour, right? Okay, it's going to take you a while to save up enough to even put a down payment on a house. You know what I mean? So if you're getting paid so little compared to the cost of living, that's where there's a problem, and that benefits the capitalists. We see this in third world countries that aren't socialist. They're capitalist countries, and they have an underclass that is exploited by the business class. And I propose a twofold option, or two options. There's a V that has to happen at some point. Or the contradictions of capitalism will bring us back to where we had child. I mean, I've gone on libertarian sites and stuff where I see people advocating for child labor under the guise of freedom, right? Advocating for pedophilia under the guise of liberty and freedom, right? This is what we're talking about. These are the kind of people we're dealing with here. And my argument to them is, look, if the other capitalists know that people are desperate, they're not going to pay them. They're going to pay them inversely proportionate to their desperation. The more desperate you are, the less they'll pay you, right? That's why if you're not desperate, and let's say you got rich parents, or you inherited something, or you lucked out on, or you have a special skill, you got birthed out. Like I was talking to someone today, a good friend of mine. He introduced me to this. Just showed me this girl who started drawing when she was like 10, these masterpieces, blow your mind masterpieces, right? I'm like, okay, that's great for her. She's a millionaire now. That's super great for her. How many of us are born like that, right? That's neat for a person to do that. But if you're not born with like these special talents and all of these things, a fundamental question has to be raised. Do you have a right to exist on this world? Simply because you were birthed out, does that give you a right to live on this world? So it's a fundamental question. Yes, you do, or no, you don't, right? If I'm willing to work, like for instance, self-subsistence is work. Is plowing a field for your own subsistence work? Is hunting or fishing or doing one of these activities to the point where if you don't bring home animal, you will not have animal to eat. You will have to search for some other type of food, right? And I'm not saying that people. Well, let me back up. That's work, right? That's work. And even with modern technologies, let's say, for instance, you had a hydroponic or even an aquaponic setup. A hydroponic setup being a soilless method of growing plants, right? With using water and minerals that are infused in the water, dissolved in the water. Or aquaponics, which incorporates, instead of using fertilizer or introducing minerals, you introduce a living being like fish or prawn or something that will live and create this cycle by breaking down the nutrients in the food that you feed. Like it's like the freaking natural world, sort of, in a contained system. Anyway, so you could produce quite a bit of food as far as vegetable food, while also producing your protein food, animal protein, right, in the form of fish or And you can even use it. I'm sure there's other ways the people will invent other ways to cycle back through to where you're using less water, you're not fertilizing, you're not doing all of these things that are harming the environment, but are actually helping to keep everything sort of self-contained. Anyway, those things could be applied. Now, how many people out there are trying to live off grid, right? And how expensive is that to live off grid, right? Because if someone was to say, well, James, I don't know, I think people would rather work at Walmart all day or work at a big box store all day and Uber drive and do some other third job rather than go live on the land and just not be exploited and just work really hard to feed yourself and do your own thing. Maybe not, but I'll tell you, there's a whole survivalist group of people out there that they just can't wait till shit hits the fan so they can have to play survival. Well, you know what? What if they all left the workforce and just go fucking survive on the commons, right? What if you don't like the idea of giving people equity in the enterprises that they helped build, just as much as your shareholders gave you money so that you could invest that to further your business, those workers gave you money by letting you exploit them instead of going somewhere else, right? So they should have skin in they have skin in the game too. They hitched their wagon to your shit. And if your shit fails, they have no job. When your shit fails, you become labor. When your shit fails, they lose their house. They can't feed their kids, right? So that's the thing that we got to really face the reality of, because we've been fed a lie this whole time. And I'm not tinfoil hatting you guys. This is real. You've been fed a lie. Just because it works better for certain people. Now, not to say that people don't pop out of the system and make a lot of money, but what's the dream? What does the dream become? I want to stop being exploited. So what am I gonna do? I'm gonna go and create my own system of exploitation, find myself some employees and start exploiting them the best that I possibly can to make the most money that I can. That is the capitalist mantra, basically, right? My point being, there is no alternative to this exploitation. If you don't have capital, you don't have land, you don't have some special skill, you didn't get popped out of the womb with a special skill, you become part of the general labor. And per supply and demand that they talk about, your supply becomes high, right? And you can work for 10 years. I was talking to a lady in Virginia, worked for freaking Burlington fabric, Burlington Coat Factory, basically, when they had a plant in Virginia. They ended up, after 40 years or 30, it might have been 30 years, they ended up moving the plant to Mexico. What did she get from it? She just simply lost her job. She helped build that to the point where they could invest the money to go over there and take those jobs and find more desperate people, right? You get paid inversely proportionate to your desperation. Where can we find the most desperate people? Oh, there's some desperate people over there across the border. Desperate people, we could pay less money. Okay, let's take it over there. Plus the exchange rate, Well, let's keep them desperate, keep their country desperate. That way their exchange rate's favorable, huh? That's how we play. That's how big we play. Okay? This can't last forever. Otherwise, we're going to go backwards. And every time we go backwards, the capitalists make more money. And then people have to fight and scratch and beg and possibly get shot to fight for things like various workers' rights and things like that. And so we haven't seen it happen now. We live in a system where, for the most part, things are not 100%, depends. Depends on the statistics. It's hard to say who are you looking at as far as how do you really define poverty in America? If you can't afford food and shelter, are you in poverty? How about health insurance? Are you in poverty? At what point, right? And then if you can't afford those things, how do you afford school? How do you afford skill development? How do you afford to go get experience doing something else so you can bust out of that role or whatever? there is no alternative to this exploitation. And because there's no alternative, supply grows when it should be dropping down. So if all of the survivalists, if all of the people who are willing to go live off the land and be self-sufficient went and did it, right, and were successful at it, now the capitalists have to compete with the prospect of, dude, this guy, he or she, these people are out here making their own vegetables. They're out here raising their own animals. They got their own clothes. They're growing their own materials. They're doing their own thing. And the biggest thing is, like, some people can do that now, but you have to buy your way out. You have to first be exploited by somebody in the hopes of saving enough money to get some land to go do that stuff on. My proposal, if I were president, to all my Far Side fans out there, I'd make sure all that money spent. Anyway, what was I saying? Yes. If I were to make policy suggestions, I would say either to the capitalists, either you aid in a transition to to market socialism, retention of the free market, guarantee you can vest over time, like a lot of people vest in a 401k or something like that. What if you could vest into basically shares in the company, right? Not that you have to take money that you already earned from your labor, right, and then to go back and buy into it. No, I'm talking about you're getting paid back for your time. You already got paid for your labor. Now you're getting paid for your time, right? Because what does equity mean? Why do people invest in the stock market, right? You're hoping for capital gains. Then you could cash out and bring capital infusion to your accounts, right? Or your endeavors. Maybe, what would it be like if you could sell those shares off and now you suddenly had, let's say you worked someplace for 10 years and the business just grew, right? And over time, you've acquired equity. And not only that, but the portion of equity that you have is worth more and more and more because you were part of that. Now, how do we define what part? I don't know, but we could talk about that. Let's have a discussion. But I would just say, as long as you're able to keep your job and you didn't get fired, then you're helping. And if you're not helping, then your supervisor needs to get you out of there. That's their job, right? But if you're there and you last that long, and let's say your shares go up to like 30 grand, and you leave and you sell your shares back, do you think you could use that 30 grand to start your own business, right? If you're barely surviving, how are you going to start a business? What capital are you going to use for even a down payment on a finance or on a business loan? Or how about this? Same 10 years. Let's say you want to keep your equity and hold it for, you want to invest it in something else, or you want to keep it in an account and just let it grow. Okay, great. But also there may be provisions for dividends and ongoing residual income because of the work that you did in the past, right? You worked somewhere for 10 years. Maybe after you leave, you get 10 years worth of dividend collection, right? How cool would that be? You work somewhere 10 years, you help build it up. Now, if it fails, then you don't get anything, just like the capitalist doesn't get anything. But if you succeed and he and she or whoever they succeed, then in fact, it wouldn't be the same necessarily. But if the enterprise succeeds, then everyone's making more money. And it's not about taxing the wealthy people that are just making money off the backs of the labor. I don't trust the government, right? I don't trust the government to, and that's another trope or straw man. The Atlas Society idiots over there will say stuff like, "Oh, you're talking about market socialism. You must want the government to control everything." I'm like, I never said that. I said you as a worker should own equity in the business that you're working in. If you're working at a call center that's not government, then how would you being part owning like a shareholder in that company be that the government owns it somehow? It's not. It's bullshit. It's a straw man. What's a straw man? Oh no, that's another vocabulary term, right? Straw man fallacy is basically you create a fake scarecrow that you can knock down. Oh, you want socialism, so you must want the government to control everything. Boom, straw man. Yeah, so you want the government to control everything. Let me knock down that argument, because the government can't control everything, because the government can't know everything about everybody. Man, ain't nobody said that. I didn't say that. I said guarantee workers equity in the shit that their work built. Just because you had some money, you came in with some money and you put together a plan, a method for extracting value from a bunch of workers, doesn't mean that what you're doing is righteous in any way or should be rewarded in a manipulated situation. Again, we don't have an alternative, so you can take advantage of that. If people had an alternative to go live off the land, then fine. Maybe we don't do market socialism and we increase tax rates and we fund the commons. And if you say, you know what, fuck it, I'm tired of working 5 jobs. I'm tired of doing all this shit. You know what? I'm going to go live on the commons, and I'm just going to wake up at the crack of dawn, and I'm going to go tend my field, and I'm going to go, tend to my animals, and I'm going to spend the rest of my day fucking off. Or maybe I want to go be doing art. Maybe I want to go do some other shit. I don't know. Maybe I'm going to go teach kids around in the neighborhood how to hunt and be self-sufficient, right? Whatever. But the fact of the matter is people would transition out, and that would force the capitalists to have a competition for their offering of exploitation. As it is now, if you can't find a good job to pay rent or pay mortgage or whatever you got, you lose it. You can be homeless. You could have no food. You could simply just die. And you don't get to just go live on the land. It's either already owned by the government or owned by someone else. No trespassing signs everywhere, right? So as soon as you light up a fire, Popo is going to show up, Bureau of Land Management going to show up, someone going to show up, kick your ass off. So now what, right? That's not a choice. You don't get to do that. So those libertarians say, well, you could just go live off the land. No, you fucking can't, you idiot. Unless you buy it. That fucking, musical chair Boogaloo already came and went. They already shot up the Indians. Whoever claimed the land already happened. We're not allowed to go shoot up people. I can't go shoot up my neighbor and take their house and start acquiring a property portfolio. Oh, yeah, well, how'd you build your portfolio? Oh, well, shit, I invested in an AR and I got a couple, pistols and stuff. Yeah, I just started going down the neighborhood and just shooting up people's houses and kicking them out and saying, look, it's my house now, bitch, right? And now I'm renting them out, making tons of money. It's awesome. Because if we go far enough back, nobody's buying shit from somebody. Someone took some shit from somebody. There was some primitive accumulation occurring. So the whole foundation of what we're dealing with as far as land rights, as far as what really constitutes private property rights is questionable, is really questionable, because it's the monopoly board that's already been run, right? And unless you come up with a scheme like Bezos or something, you don't really have the ability to avoid the exploitation and whatever. So I'm talking to this person, and I'm like, look, I'll even give you. I'm like, look, what I described is market socialism. There's still a market. It's not central control. And she can't even look like, she's like, oh, well, market socialism, that's an oxymoron, I'm like, you can't even do a fucking Google search. You can't even type 2 words, market and socialism, in the fucking search bar and hit the fucking enter button and see if what the fuck I'm talking about is real or not. No, you'd rather be so stupid, right? So, I mean, in her mind, she's not stupid. In her mind, she's not ignorant, right? Peak Dunning-Kruger. She's so confident and so confident. And I'm like, here you go. Here's a fucking Google link. Respond. Look it up. Here's a definition. Bam. And I'm like, I know you won't look at it. I already know you won't look at it. I even said in the comments, I probably could pull it up. Maybe, I don't know if I want to go hunt for it. But basically what I said was, right now, I've included a Google search for you of market socialism, but you won't look. You won't dare look, because that's like a polar bear standing mere feet behind you, and you know it's there. You don't want to turn around, right? That's what's going on. She knows the information's there. It can be found. Why am I saying it? Why am I so confident? Oh, because I know, because I've done the research. I've already looked it up, right? I've looked at things from multiple angles already. And I'm pointing out a deficiency in the way that she's viewing something. So deep into Dunning-Kruger that this person will not actually look at that and have a sensible conversation. She literally goes back and starts talking about China. And well, that's a system not unlike China. I'm like, wait. So China, let me get this straight. China guarantees workers equity, the ownership in Chinese businesses, and democratic control of those workplaces. China does that, right? She is so stupid, right? So daft that she can't see that the thing that I described is not occurring in reality, but yet she's still going to cite that as a rebuttal to what I'm saying, right? And that's what we're dealing with. And you, I'm sure, have run into people who you're trying to explain something, and they'll either make shit up, or they'll like, you get these libertarians out there that'll be like, oh, this person has cancer. Well, oh, they should have made better life choices, right? There was like a baseball player died recently, and from cancer, and like, super rich, super healthy, because pro baseball player, right? And I'm thinking, oh, what about this libertarian dude that says, hey, why should I have to pay for people's life choices? Dude gets cancer, right? I mean, he's part of our society. This is natural for us. This is the natural state of being for humanity, is to be empathetic. I remember one time I was riding in a car with Olivia and Aaron Rodgers. This shocked me about Aaron Rodgers. Me and my brother are driving Olivia and Aaron over to the airport. They're going to respect different airports. And I remember, Olivia's going through, they only have a few minutes with each other. And so she's trying to get through a bunch of stuff, like itinerary stuff, and when are we going to talk again, all these important things with him when they were together and whatever. And one of the things that shocked me the most about that ride to the airport is my brother's driving, I'm sitting in the passenger seat. We're talking about society, some shit. And then for some reason, this notion of empathy comes up. And I say, well, empathy is humanity's natural state. And my brother's like, oh, really? So we're more apt to react for the good of others, even to sacrifice of our own condition to help someone else and alleviate the pain of someone else, is more natural than to take advantage of that and put yourself ahead. And I was like, yes, absolutely. Because scientific anthropological evidence, paleontologists, whoever, going back into either pre-human, hominid, pre-Homo sapien hominids, and up to early Homo sapien, or all of our history up until recently, and including now, has been communal living. You don't fight the lion alone. You can't kill the pack of wolves alone. And anyway, so I'm like, yeah, empathy is the base human condition. And Aaron Rodgers just pops his head between the two seats. He's like, what? You said that, did you just say that empathy was the base human condition? I was like, yeah, absolutely. And he's like, well, what makes you think, everyone talks about we're here to compete against each other, and we're all vying for top spot, and it's just like, hey, it's social Darwinism, right? If you can't hack it, you lack it, you're gonna die, right? And so I was like, no. Then one of the reasons why, and the most compelling evidence about this is the fact that you see pre-humans or early hominids that have debilitating injuries, right? So let's say Lothar is fighting the mammoth and breaks his leg, right? They found broken, adult bones, like leg bones, debilitating bones. Like if you were out in the wild trying to survive, you would die, that have been healed, right? They see the ossification along the fracture, right? Things like that. Who's fucking feeding Lothar? How is Lothar still alive, and why? I could take Lothar's bitches if I'm a man. If I'm a woman, well, Lothar's not if he's not my man, why would I care? And even if he is my man, well, shit, his fucking legs busted. What is he gonna get me? Am I gonna get choice mammoth anymore? He can't even fucking fight a mammoth anymore, right? So maybe I don't need to be hitched up to fucking Lothar. But yet Lothar has healed bones. Somebody's giving their food to fucking Lothar, even though he doesn't have utility to the group. You see what I mean? So the base human condition, I mean, you can see it with children, where they will give of their own thing. I used it in the last episode. I talked about kids splitting a cookie in half, and I'll give you one of my cookies, or hell, fuck it, you have my cookie. I don't even want it. You're crying. You having a bad day. You have my whole cookie. And it melts our hearts, and we share it on Facebook. And on the flip side, we have a whole group of people that think, oh, well, we live in a society where we're all fighting each other. And if you can't make it, you sort of deserve to die. And if you're poor, that's just because you're lazy and you're not worth being on this earth because you got to work. Well, what is work? Self-subsistence is work, right? What they're saying is, well, if you don't let yourself be exploited, then what use are you on this earth, right? It's some crazy shit. Lothar sounds familiar. Mark Medalla says Lothar is from Saturday Night Live. It was an old Phil Hartman character. It was Lothar of the Hill People. I think it was it. Was it? Or was it Dana Carvey? Oh, shit. Now I don't know. I'm thinking Caveman Lawyer. Unfrozen Caveman Lawyer is the Phil Hartman character. Let me see. Lothar. It's Lothar of the Hill People. It might be. God, Lothar. Lothar of the Hill People. It is Saturday Night Live character. Mike Myers. Oh, totally off. Anyway, it's been a long time. But Lothar of the Hill People. That's what it is. It is Hartman? Who is it? Oh, I need to look and see. Anyway, Lothar of the Hill People. Oh, it is Phil Hartman. So Lothar fucking gets his arm whacked off by a mammoth or some shit. Still alive. So our history is built on working with each other. So all this notion of all this Ayn Rand selfishness is a virtue, the individual is paramount, it goes against science. The irony is all these idiots on the Atlas Society want to cite science all the time, yet all of the actual science of studying actual humans and the history of the existence of humanity ever on this earth and in the known universe has proven and shown that we are community animals who help each other out. And we're not the only ones. There's other animals that show empathy, actual empathy, that will actually sacrifice of their well-being to help another animal, right? You can look it up yourself if you don't believe me. Type in examples of animal empathy. That way I don't play some video and get another warning from YouTube about playing copyright shit. But yeah, So anyway, I don't want to, by the way, I don't want to just be rambling about shit about, you know, the Atlas Society or whatever, if that's not something necessarily that you guys want to talk about. Because that's basically been the last 2 episodes sort of talking about that. If there are some topics you want to discuss, drop them in the comments or send me a PM. If you want to be on the show, let me know. You can Skype in. I don't have a number right now, but probably if you feel like calling in, I'll go set that up. But let me know so that we can make this an interactive thing, because I want to hear what your thoughts are, especially if you don't agree with something that I'm saying. Challenge me on it, you know. Whatever. Let's see what happens. You know what I mean? And I'll try not to be too rude. Sometimes, I mean, like, I'm pretty rude to these Atlas Society people, because they're so frustrating, because they won't pick up a damn book, and they won't. Like, I have to go through whole chapters practically and describe chapters of something that's been described already. Like, if they already read it, and I could just be like, look, this is the phenomenon described by Smith. You know what would happen is, if they actually read and understood these things, then we wouldn't be having an argument. Be like, oh shit, that's what's happening. Oh wow, we've all been manipulated to become wage slaves. I see. And put debt on top of that. I see. And Mark's jumping in with a question. Thank you, Mark, for being part of this discussion tonight. He asks, doesn't capitalism need poor people to step on? And that's exactly it. If you look at, and it's not hyperbolic. It's not, right? What's hyperbolic mean? Hyperbole. It's not exaggeration. I'm not just making up some shit, right? There's a concept called primitive accumulation, as described by Marx, actually, but also influenced or really, basically, he was heavily influenced by Adam Smith. 1776, Marx came in the 1800s. He recognized what Adam Smith was describing when Adam Smith says, look, if you're going to create a factory, you have to remember that this person toiling in the factory can just chill at home, and he can make all this shit himself. So when you make some shoes, you got to make the cost of those shoes low enough that a dude that can literally go make them on his own, kill his cow and tan his own shit and make his own shoes, you have to make it appealing enough that they can buy it. And by the way, in order to do that, you need to have labor enough, cheap enough, that you can make it without you personally, the capitalist, with money, without you actually getting your hands dirty with a fucking nasty ass shoe leather. Fuck that. Let me hire these people we just kicked off their land by creating property tax, or by putting up a bunch of fences up in what used to be common land, the commons, where everyone shared the forest, where everyone shared the lake, where everyone just, they just went and go fishing and hunting and, and don't fuck things up. But no, they basically, on the suggestion of the contemporaries of Adam Smith, so back in 1776, the people who were also writing about economic machinations and stuff happening economically, those folks were like, dude, if you're gonna do this shit, you need to get those lazy ass peasants who are sitting around just chilling with the little wheat stalk in their mouth, with overalls, just chilling. I made my food, I got enough to eat, and I'm just gonna be like playing checkers, man, or whatever, right? That's the life they want to live. Well, you got to kick them all out of the house and make it so that they're desperate enough to go work in that factory and chop up that meat, can that sardine, or do whatever the fuck they say for cheap enough that now you can sell it to whoever and sell it back to these people, right? But then there's the contradiction, as described by Adam Smith and by Marx, by the fact that if you are paying the general labor force so little, they won't be able to afford the products that they're making. So who are you selling it to, right? And that's a contradiction, but they don't care. They're going to extract as much as they can until the point where there's a crash or a point where they simply cannot sell something. And that means there's going to be an overproduction. That means there's going to be a bunch of wasted shit that no one can buy. And that's where you see during the Depression, they literally had food rotting away, literally had shit rusting away, machinery and different things rusting away because nobody could buy it. And the capitalists wanted to make enough money, so they pushed and they could produce so much. They made so much and then basically wasted all the resources. And everybody, you know, those Ayn Rand morons will be like, oh, well, capitalism in the market, you know, that's the most efficient method of allocating resources. Meanwhile, how much food gets thrown away in a supermarket? How much food gets thrown away, you know, in a time where like this soybean shit that's going on right now. Now, you could say, well, that's because of government, because Trump did some shit, right? But also, what was I going to say? Shit. Oh, yeah. But like I said, in the Depression, there was an overproduction and nobody could buy it. We're going to see another situation where there's going to be another crash in some market. Like, for instance, we see millennials getting blamed for not being able to, or for not keeping stuff like Applebee's and those chain restaurants open anymore. Well, because they aren't receiving a wage that went up with inflation, you're not seeing enough of a consumer base that's able to even afford that shit, you know? And so that is a reflection of the conundrum that we have. Also, you know, I believe that younger folks are like, with the little money they do have, they would rather seek a higher quality product. Whereas previous generations were like, I just want the easy shit, right? And a chain restaurant has to be good because there's so many of them that it has to be good, right? And some people would take an aversion to a mom and pop shop. And I think the younger generation has been sort of disillusioned by that notion and seeks the mom and pop shops. But a lot of times, because of you know, the economies of scale and things like that, you know, the big box or the big chain restaurants can out profit and outmaneuver and out leverage some of these smaller mom and pop shops. And so sometimes the cost for the quality and the cost for going to these places ends up being higher. And so as these young folks don't have money, those are going to eventually wither away as housing costs go up and other food costs and living expenses go up, right? But yeah, I mean, these are contradictions inherent in capitalism. The other thing that happens as well is the capitalist will basically and you may have noticed this in your own life and own experience through working through the labor force. The capitalist, as described by Adam Smith, will dumb down or simplify a task so that it's so easy that anyone can do it. That way, the supply of people who could do it is so high that they can pay them nothing. See what I mean? So they manipulate supply and demand by creating something that's easy to fulfill, right? So that's why you don't go from point A to point Z building or making a thing. A lot of times people just do this one thing. The other part is if you are, what was I going to say? I can't remember. I just saw something just made me lose my train of thought. Anyway, someone remind me, Mark, if you're still watching, remind me of what I was talking about. But anyway, the fact of the matter is I was talking about Adam Smith and the how they will manipulate the method by which you do your job. So the other reason why you will only learn very specific, small portions of a process in general capitalist practice is because that way you can't replicate that and create a competition to that enterprise. So by that structure, it is causing you to forever be exploited. You see what I mean? So this is how insidious it is. But it takes so much time to explain this crap. How do you explain it in a rebuttal comment on the Atlas Society Idiots without creating a too long didn't read fucking paragraph, right? You almost can't, because the world is complex and there are many things happening, and you can't just try to describe the world as if it's a binary thing. It's either this or that. I mean, yeah, Black Sheep gave us the song, but the reality is there's a whole lot of shit in between, and we got to really look at all the moving parts to really understand what's fundamentally happening. But yeah, we're also looking at a situation where we've lived through the McCarthyism era with massive punishments for any type of collective ideas, socialism, communism, anything like that. Literally, you got shot. Literally, you got kicked out of your employment. You might have been jailed, depending on what you were doing. So we're looking at the trauma and reverberations of that era, and then also the 80s Cold War stuff. So we're having to dig through layers and layers of propaganda that, of course, people don't think that they've been propagandized, especially people that use it the most, like the United people in America. They think that they're immune to propaganda. And you might be like, well, what makes you so smart? You think you're immune to propaganda, James? Well, no, I'm not. But I'm aware of it, right? I look for it. And if you're not even looking for it and you're simply absorbing that's whatever's around you, then you're just going to be led, right? You're not critically thinking. And that's something that's, I think, missing more and more in our world, is that people have just stopped critically thinking. And it's a shame, because we need it more than ever. We have the technology and capacity to destroy ourselves. And, Joe Rogan really, I think, illustrated it nicely, that comparing humans to fungus on a piece of bread, there's a point where that fungus is going to take over the bread. And the bread's going to be gone, and there's just going to be a bunch of dead fungus where the bread used to be. And that's sort of what's happening now. We're consuming to no end. And I would have suspected at some point in my life, I would have suspected that we are collectively more intelligent than fungus. I don't know if we are, especially if you go to the Atlas Society, because those fuckers are morons. All right. So, Mark, thank you again for a comment. Mark agrees. They dumb down the job to hire someone for cheap. I've worked for 2 manufacturing businesses. Yeah, it's true. This has been true since, so really, since the inception of capitalism, really. Before capitalism, you definitely had an imperfect system. You had feudalism. And you also had the tradecraft, where you had basically apprenticeships and journeyman type processes, where in some unions and stuff, and some skilled labor, specialty skilled labor, you still see remnants of those categories existing, as you go through the various levels within a trade. But it was back in the day, you had like the blacksmith, and then you would be an apprentice to the blacksmith, and the blacksmith taught you everything that you needed to know to be a blacksmith. And now we have a situation where if you go to be a blacksmith, the blacksmith will show you how to hammer this one thing. And that's your thing, is you're the hammer guy, right? And then maybe if you work hard enough, you can get promoted to the poke it into the kiln guy, the heat the iron guy, right? And they will purposely create these levels. An example is Upton Sinclair's The Jungle. In that book, He's describing the early 1900s meatpacking plants out in like New York and in the eastern, I think it's in New York, up in the American Northeast. And people were dying in the meatpacking plants, getting churned up into hot dogs and shit. Nobody knew, nobody gave a fuck. They just like put it in a can and send it on its way. And there was no worker safety. I mean, it's a fictional book, but based on the condition, it's describing what would be a contemporary condition for people that immigrated to the United States, and they're desperate. So if they're desperate, what's the capitalist going to pay? Inversely proportionate to that. So that they are highly desperate. So therefore their wages are desperately low, right? And so for pennies, they're working and toiling, and they fight and peck at each other for the chance to not even maybe get a raise. I think maybe you got a raise, I don't know, but there was like these positions where you could get out of the packing of the cans and move. This is what the women were doing, was packing the cans. But there's one group that could put labels on the cans, and you got to sit down, and you got to, all you had to do is put label. You didn't have to manipulate the meat, and you didn't have to touch the stuff, and you didn't have to be around the nasty shit. And what did the capitalists do? They're like, well, you start doing this really shitty work, and if you do really well and listen to us and do everything right, we might let you sit down and put labels on cans. And they're like fighting and scratching. I mean, because if you're doing the same shit you hate over and over and over, and the point is that you hate it. Your life, the life you only get once on this earth, you can't get that time back, and you're spending it doing something you can't stand and hate because you have no other way to survive. That does not sound voluntary to me. But all these Atlas Shrugged morons are going to say, oh, it's voluntary. It's a voluntary exchange of labor. You think that they wanted to live like that? To voluntarily exchange their labor to be in unsafe conditions and being abused by their bosses? I doubt it, right? They would much rather do something else. But, they were sold a different bill of goods back in the old country. So they came to America, and now it's like, oh, fuck, what's going on here? Right? But that is capitalism. That wasn't socialism, right? That's capitalism. If you haven't read The Jungle, I would definitely read The Jungle. And then after reading The Jungle, go see if check the veracity, right? Is it valid? Is it real? The Jungle. Look at the U.S. labor struggle. Look at the fight between workers and capital through our history. People getting shot, people getting the National Guard called on them for strikes, so that the strike would get broken. People literally dying so that they could fight for like a weekend, so that they have the right to a weekend and not get fired. It's crazy shit. It's crazy shit. Mark contributed again with a comment. Says, I live in a red state and travel to a blue state every year, and the propaganda is real. Local television is very different. And it's I'll tell you what, one of the things I think people don't really understand is that the truth is elusive. And even if you know the truth, it may be useless. Because in a world of lies, in a world of deception, if you're the only one that knows the truth, then what are you? You're fucking crazy. Who's going to believe your truth-telling ass when they're immersed in the vulgarity of deception, right? So I really feel like this is a crisis, a real crisis, not like, oh, well, whatever. No, I'm like, literally, because we don't know what the fuck to do, because we have people feeding us some shit. And I don't have, maybe you guys have, but more and more, I guarantee more and more people, especially as they have to grind even harder and harder because of inflation and because of other pressures and wage stagnation. As that starts to happen, it's going to get worse, right? And you're going to be forced to put your nose down to the grindstone to the point where you can't see what's happening around you in the world anymore. You're too broke to be woke, right? Too broke to be woke. Like you're so broke, or you're just in a position where your entire time and life is dedicated to martyring yourself on the cross of capital, of the market, in order to make your rent, in order to live in a decent neighborhood that you like, or the school district for your kids, or whatever shit, you know, these sacrifices you're willing to make, right? And meanwhile, your kid, what I was telling you, you're getting paid for your labor. But how about your time? How much time do you spend away from your kids? How much time do you spend away from your loved ones? How much time do you spend away from doing the shit that you want to do with the one fucking life that you have? Those seconds, the minutes, the hours, you don't get those back. You can make the money back. You don't get your time back. So I am saying right now, when those motherfuckers are paying you for what you do, they're paying you for your labor. They're not paying you for your time, right? They might use time as an incremental method by which they allocate you this payment for your labor. But how many people are salary? How many people are commission, right? So your labor is resulting in that payout, but that time you can't get back. And my argument is that either you find a way to give people their time back by guaranteeing equity in the shit that they built with their labor, right? Or we tax the fuck out of you so much that, and we give people enough, like basically the way we did land grant colleges for white people and the land grants. All these white people needed to go out west, right? That black people weren't allowed to take part in these things, right? So again, musical chair boogaloo. All these people get whatever land they can, gets in the family. Now everyone else from future generations, oh well, fuck you, right? If that same type of endeavor happened, and we said, all right, well, fuck it. If you don't want to transition to market socialism, because we gave you a fucking chance. We gave you a chance after the massive labor movements. The population gave you a fucking chance, capitalists. They gave you a chance. And in the 50s, maybe 60s, things were going all right. Okay. We had a pretty decent labor movement. People were getting paid proportionately well compared to the profits and pay that CEOs and other people and executives got. You know, obviously they got more money, but what's up, David Lay? They got more money than their workers, but it wasn't such a disparity, right? It wasn't huge. It wasn't 300 times. It was like maybe 20, 30 times what the base or the average employee gets. A CEO might have got that much, which sounds like still a lot, right? But now we're looking at 300, hundreds of times the average compensation that you would see from the average worker. So things have totally gone out of whack. So either, right? Let's back up. We gave them a chance. So what did they do? Instead of maintaining that so everyone could be prosperous, what did they do? They created free trade, right? Which basically said, yeah, our American workers aren't desperate enough. Let's go find more desperate people somewhere else, like in Mexico or wherever we can, of China, right? Wherever we can put a factory or find a factory that is exploiting someone to the point where we can make the most profit, right? And so they opened it up. Did they open the borders for people to move from one place to another? Not necessarily, but they certainly opened the door for capital to move from one place to another, right? And so people lost their jobs, and they went from manufacturing to something, to service sector jobs, but service sector jobs weren't paying that much. And a lot of these folks that had jobs that built the businesses to the point where they could even fucking afford to go off and make a factory somewhere else, right? It was built on their backs. They get fucked. Look at Sears right now. They're trying to fuck them out of severance. They should have equity, right? They should have had democratic control over that enterprise, because who built it? Did the fucking capitalists build it? No, they didn't build that, right? Labor built that. All that the capitalists did was come up with some money, right? And now there are some business owners out there who hunt and fight and scratch and peck. Well, great. That's the American dream. How many people want to do that? A lot of people want to do that, but they can't without first being exploited, right? And so I'm not really talking about those guys, mom and pop folks out there, or even the people that worked their ass off to create huge corporations later on. There's a point where you're not really doing the physical work anymore, and you're maybe overseeing something else. And if you are able to build all of this and employ all of these people, the more employees you have, really, what impact are you having on the total output and profit of that business? And it might have been your idea or whatever, but without the labor to help you, where does your idea go? Right? So again, either because they already had their chance with unions, with strong workers' rights, they had their chance. They decided they wanted to cut back our workers' rights. They decided they wanted to play this game where they wanted to go through a generational long ebb and flow, where we go from child labor and deaths in the meat packing plants, going all the way to where we had the strong labor movements, et cetera. And then you have a situation now where we're reversing a bunch of that, and people are getting more and more desperate, and et cetera. And even Mark mentioned too, like, dude, you making me want to quit my job, but I got to pay my bills. And that's the thing. You have to find that method of exploitation in order to pay your bills, right? Now, I'm sure he would love to work for himself and start his own business, but there's risks involved with that too, right? And you could say, well, yeah, see, the capitalist is taking these risks. Well, Mark is taking a risk by working for that capitalist, right? What if the capitalist is Sears and they go fucking belly up because the capitalist did shit? It wasn't the workers that did it, right? So there's a risk there too. But the thing is, if he had equity in wherever he was working this whole time, he's worked in certain places. I guarantee he's about my age. He's worked in places for a very long time, long enough to have gained equity to where he could have sold some equity and had a capital infusion to be a down payment for a business venture that he wants to create. He could have equity that created dividend residual income that he could maybe live off of while he created different endeavors, or pursued different endeavors. This would represent a fundamental change in the way that our society works, and it would create additional competition in the market, which would bring down prices, and it would give redistribution of wealth at the creation without trusting the fucked up manipulated by money government by increasing taxes on the wealthy. I don't want to increase. If anything, I want to cut taxes, but we're moving to market socialism, or raise taxes and bring back the commons and fund the capacity for people that say, yeah, I don't want to fucking work at a big box store, or I don't want to do this menial shit that I hate. I would rather go live in a house with a couple acres, and maybe there's a grant for a hydroponics or aquaponics system, some solar panels, and who knows, maybe by then the internet will be a government utility, and yeah, you can still, maybe you still have to pay a little bit, but you can work for yourself. You have land, you have the ability to self-subsist, and if you want to grow some extra shit so you can participate in the market and make some money, go for it. Why not? But guess what? Because it's not about the market as far as exchange of money that I'm worried about. No, I'm worried about exploitation. Because if you get sick of their fucking exploitation, you can leave. You can leave and go work for yourself and just work on the land. And now some people can't do that. There might be a way to still accommodate them, because some people really like working the land. And so maybe they'll work the land for someone else in exchange for stuff. Oh no, we got an exchange system, right? The market still exists even under the commons, where you're getting away from capitalism. So there's a lot going on there. And a lot of folks get really upset when I get into depth talking about this stuff, because they've grown up believing something so different. So did I. But guess what? I read and understood and looked around at material reality objectively, whether it hurt my feelings or not, whether I felt like I was stupid for being wrong or not, right? And seeing through the bullshit. Like when Ben Shapiro's like, well, you just want the government to control everything, and there's no way that the government can know individual rights. And like, motherfucker, I never said that. No, that's fundamentally different than what I'm describing. There's a process to this whole thing. And I almost don't want to let a cat out of the bag, but I believe that what I described, this transition to market socialism, this is in maybe the next 150 years going to lead to the Star Trek space utopia communism, basically, that that sort of universe describes, right? All right, so we did have a comment on our Facebook, so thank you, David Lay, for putting a comment on there. What about companies suing other companies for copyright infringement just because they're trying to get out of a hole, like Gibson Guitar, for instance? Ooh, calling out Gibson Guitar, some shots fired. Yeah, that brings up a good point. The capitalists always, especially libertarians, always try to poo-poo the government and say, oh, well, the government is useless and da-da-da, until you infringe on their copyright. Now the government, all of a sudden, oh, shit. Beep, beep, beep. Hey, yo, someone's infringing on my copyright. Go get them. I'm going to sue them. Now, when you sue somebody, where does that go through? It's one of the fucking branches of what? Government, right? Oh, well, I mean, government's good for copyright infringement purposes. Yeah, so now suddenly when it comes to protecting your own interests, the government's important. But when it comes to protecting the interests of others, fuck the government. What are you talking about? Government, we don't even need that. That's ridiculous, right? But yeah, copyright infringement. Look, that's just part of capitalism, because the aim of the game of doing anything under capitalism is just to make money. You might say, well, why would you do anything at all? Well, I don't know, because you like doing it. I mean, let's apply this to the military. Does the military pay people a ton of money? No. Are they doing it for the money? Sometimes maybe for school benefits or some other benefits. But could you say it's for the money, really? You're going to put your life on the line just for the meager salary? Ask them how much they get paid. They're really not getting paid that much. And now there's a lot of people squandering some bonuses and shit like that. And they are getting paid pretty decent, but compared to some private sector jobs, it's not that great. Go ask a private. Ask airmen, right? Ask some low-rank officers. I mean, not officers, excuse me, enlisted folks, or even the officers. Like a low-rank officer. I don't know all the different ranks and the different thing, but like in the Air Force, if you're like a second lieutenant, you might not be making all that much money, right? So why are you doing it? What's your motivation? Why are people becoming teachers? Because of all the money? No, it's not because of the money. They do it because that's what they want to do. It resonates with them. They get a reward that's not monetary, right? So who's going to start a business? Well, if I got a good idea and I want to loop some people in with me and be like, look, yeah, and if you help me build this, then you're going to be part owner in it too. And we're going to build something big, and it's going to be dope. And I'm still going to get paid, and maybe I can't make as much money as if I could practically by enslaving these people and making sure that they're desperate so that I could take advantage of them, yeah, I'm not going to make that money. You're just not going to make that kind of money anymore. And it's not because of envy. It's because it's fucked up, because you're basically making the money off of other people. People should be treated like partners if they're working with you, and not like machines. And that's what we're doing. People back in the day with chattel slavery be like, man, I could do whatever I want with my slave. I bought him. It's mine. I bought him. And that's where, like, when you work for somebody, it's like, well, I'm paying you. I can make you do what I want with your time. Right. And of course, if it doesn't fit the job description, maybe you could sue them or something, use the government to help you, hopefully. But there's a point where, they could just simply, because there's no union rights, they could simply just fire you, right? You don't want to do something, even though it's not in the job description. Okay, I'm going to just terminate you. Now, sometimes you can sue someone for wrongful termination if someone takes your case, or if you have the resources to do so. If you happen to be a laborer with legal counsel on tap, you could get that. But some people can't, right? And so they just got to deal with the shit, So we got another comment in our Facebook feed this time, which is cool. So again, I'm simul streaming on Facebook and on YouTube. But so I'm going to read this comment from David Lay, and I'm going to wrap it up. And I want to tell you again, if there are some things you want to talk about, it could be anything, especially something controversial. Let's talk about something controversial that you have an opinion on, and you want to see what my take is on it. Drop it in the comments, send me a PM or whatever. Or if you want to be on the show, again, let me know and we'll set it up. All right. So David Lay says, some industries are a failing industry. When you're not doing anything new, interesting, or cutting edge that flows with demand or the times, you're doomed to fail. That's absolutely true. Suing other companies based off of what you've done in the past and waited too long to react is garbage. Well, that again, it's that dual nature of, wanting the government and then not wanting the government regulations and stuff that is part of the capitalist contradiction. And I'm not familiar with the specifics of what he's describing, suing other companies based on what you've done in the past. So someone must. So like, for instance, it's like that TED Ed thing that I use. If they come back and sue me for copyright infringement for including it in my my podcast, even though they just got free distribution to the 2 people that have seen this podcast. By the way, for those of you that are tuned in, you are very, very special people, very unique, because we have at the moment on our live feed 2 people watching in YouTube and on Facebook, and 1 person on YouTube. So I'll tell you, out of how many billions of people live on this earth, you're the only one watching on YouTube right now. And so very unique. Or you're on Facebook right now, of the 2 people. So anyway, so yeah, as far as suing companies for what you did or whatever, I mean, I don't know. To me, it's like things are changing. Things are changing. It's like in the music industry, people don't really get money off of, for instance, this evolution. I've been working with some artists lately, just trying to like figure out how do you get into the game, without being subject to the gatekeepers and being exploited, basically, because you hear all the horror stories of bad contracts. So what was it? Hold on. What were we talking? Oh, yeah, about copyright infringement. Yeah, I mean, money is just made in a different way now. So like by doing stuff like that, by suing other people for using your stuff, especially if it wasn't in a malicious way, is sort of, I think it's stupid. I think I would be honored if someone used my creative stuff. And now, if they're making money off of it, it'd be nice if they throw me a bone for using my shit, at least something, hook it up, but if they're just, I don't know, like I said, I don't know the ins and outs of the situation. I guess it sort of depends. But, I mean, Dave is a musician. So like if you put your heart and soul in a song and you released it, and you expected to have ownership of that song, would you want copyright honored on that? Or if you found out if someone was, basically repackaging your song and making money off of it, would that bother you? Would you be compelled to like maybe sue somebody over it? I don't know. You can answer that. Anyway, he says also, I don't see it panning out well either way, LOL. And he's like, oh, sorry if this was a bit off topic. No, it's all part of this tapestry. It's all together, right? It's interconnected. Right? What you're describing is a offshoot of capitalism. What's the point of the copyright lawsuit? Someone out there has calculated to the point where they feel that suing this entity will net them, in the long run, will net them more than just letting them do nothing, right? Because obviously it costs money to sue somebody, or maybe someone takes your case or whatever, but then on the back end, they're going to take a lot of whatever gets rewarded. So usually there's some pencil pusher out there who, for the motive of profit, is pushing these types of actions, or like like that. What's that scene describes in Fight Club, where the auto manufacturers will calculate how much will it cost to fend off the lawsuits from deaths versus doing a recall, right? That is your capitalist resource management for the market, right there. And I mean, Ford, Chevy, they have all done it. Yet they're still here, right? So the libertarian idea, like, oh well, if they mess up and do unsafe things, then they'll go out of business and they'll be punished. Well, yeah, they get punished a little bit, but that's not monetarily, but they're still around. If you as a human being knowingly neglected something, right, like a flaw in a vehicle or a flaw in something, and someone died from it, you would get a manslaughter conviction. But if Ford, a person under the law, if Chevy, a person under the law, corporate person, entity, right, corporate person, they have citizen rights to with First Amendment right applies to them, but yet they can knowingly have flaws that kill people, and yet Ford, the entity, doesn't go through a manslaughter proceeding. Chevy, the entity, doesn't go through that either. They might pay out a settlement, but how much is your mother worth? Like seriously, how much is your cousin worth? How much is your father or anybody that you love worth? How many millions of dollars are they worth? Are they, like if you lost them, so there's no, you have a moral hazard there, and so anyway, like I said, there's a big tapestry, and it seems like this phenomenon that Dave is describing, it loosely fits in with that. We just got a comment from Brian Hansen. Hey, what's up, man? Sushiro. And he's, hey, James Boyd, saw your Instagram post for this. So good. Instagram's working to have people tune in. So this has been sort of a long episode. We had some good topics. Let me take, David just gave us a comment on Facebook. Just like writing a song. Okay, hold on. Just like writing a song, chord progressions are used in the same manner as others since the beginning of music. Yes. Oh, if they're not suing over a chord progression, are they? Because come on, that's like suing a paper manufacturer suing an artist for using the same paper that you do, or like, oh, you can't use the same, or like, oh, you can't use a Gibson guitar because I use Gibson guitars in my music and that's copyright infringement. Like, yeah, fucking song chords, a chord progression, whatever. I mean, there's only so many that can be made anyway. So that's sort of like, I don't know. Realistically, everything has been done by now. As far as Gibson, they're suing for guitar body styles being too similar. Oh, we just lost a Facebook feed. I was wondering what was going on. But anyway, let me finish his statement out. They're suing for guitar body styles being too similar. So hundreds of companies use similar body styles because they sell, because those body styles sell, and that's what people like. One option of an idea shouldn't be a crime. Yeah, I mean, and plus, typically these kinds of things have a limit of time. You know, they have a temporal limit on how long that these things can be cornered. You know, but I don't know. It's sort of like one of those things we're going to have to figure out as a society. You know, so. But yeah, but again, these are the topics that the kind of things that we talk about on the show, right? Is just like the world around us and how can we really critically look at what's happening around us. So unfortunately, we lost our Facebook crowd, and due to a Facebook thing, something popped up on the Facebook window. And so my YouTube folks, got 2 people watching on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining. Again, if there's a topic you wanted to discuss or go over, let me know. Well, I would love to talk it over with you. And you know, keep commenting, keep being part of this discussion. If you don't want to comment live, you can always just comment afterwards, after you sort of digest what we've been talking about or whatever. Maybe you get pissed off at what we're talking about. That's great. Put it in the comments, and let's and I'll hash it out on Sunday session. But yeah, I mean, and also if you want to be on the show, I'd love to have some guests come on the show. We can talk about whatever you want, especially if you have a cause or a concern or you're an expert at something. I love hearing about people who are really good at their craft, whatever that might be. So, I mean, you don't have to be here in the shop studio. If you don't want to, if you want to come to the shop studio, you can. We'll let you know in advance. There is some new movie magic going on, and I won't explain to our guests what that means. But if you do show up, you will know what I'm talking about. But yeah, if you want to be on the show, let me know. You could Skype in, Facebook Messenger, anything else, and whatever. Brian Hansen, he said, let's chat about old school Hachiroku days. I assume he's talking about the 86 Corolla days, which oddly enough, the 86 Toyota Corolla is now has been for some time, but has become a massive cult car. So you can't find one for cheap anymore. If Mark's still on, I remember, I wonder do you still have that Hachiroku that you found in the church? I remember Mark, who commented earlier, he actually saw a old Corolla that was basically abandoned in a church, and he put a note on the window, and someone ended up selling it to him, and I think it had a blown head gasket, and we took it to my garage, replaced the head gasket, and all that stuff. So yeah, he had I think his was might have been 86, maybe 85. But yeah, if you have a chance, so the folks out there that aren't in the know, if you want a potential money-making opportunity, that you will have to find the you will have to find an arbitrage in the market. Like basically someone who doesn't realize what they got. Like, a lot of people poo-poo old import cars because they're so used to like a Chevelle being worth a lot of money or a Bel Air or something. But we're in a new era now where like it was maybe end of last year, Mecum Auto or one of these big auto auctions, they auctioned off in 2000 or 1999 or 2000 Integra Type R for like 65 grand. I mean, that's more than they cost new back when it was sold. You know what I mean? And so it's on the up. I remember a dude I used to work with who bought a Acura NSX. I think it was a 91 Acura NSX. This must have been about 2003. He bought it for like 12 grand. I remember because he's always talking about it. And at these SCCA meets when I used to go racing. And he got it. Yeah, he got it for like 12 grand. It was white, had like 100-something thousand miles because people drove those Acura NSXs like they were Civics. And because they're made by Honda and they're like, oh, it's a Honda, so it'll run forever. So they take this like supercar looking thing and they drive it to the grocery store like every day, to work every day, daily driver every day because you can, because it's a Honda, right? Now, good luck trying to find one for less than 70 G's. That's a piece of shit one. If you find one that's cherry, you're looking 100,000 for a 1990 something Acura, right? And now they got the new Acura out. It's a hybrid, really expensive. But the old Acura is approaching new Acura territory because it has now become a classic car. So we're living in a new era, but something that you may not have even thought about, 1985, 86, 87 Corolla GTS is the top one you want to get. You could get an SR5 if you want. Not quite. Not up there, but it can, with some modifications, can be can be sort of cool. And Sushiro is telling us in the comments on YouTube, thank you for commenting and joining the conversation. Barrett Jackson sold a Toyota Century, so that's a big four-door sort of luxury car from Japan for $60,000. So the times are definitely changing. Like I remember vividly, there was a time when, as a kid, our family had a Datsun 210, right? And some of you guys might not know what that is. You can look it up. Old Datsun 210. This was about probably 80 something, 83. Maybe 86, 87. And I remember going to, I might have been 7, 8 years old. I go to a car. I was into cars a little bit. I just liked cars. I didn't know much about like different models of cars or what was cool or not cool. But I remember there was a car show I went to, and they had stuff like old Ford Falcon or this or that, right? Just normal cars, but they're just old. And my dad would say something like, or someone would say, my dad said something like, oh, our family used to have a Ford Falcon just like this, and everyone was goo goo gaga over this Ford Falcon. And I'm like thinking to myself, well, when is our car? The one I'm growing up with, because he grew up with Ford Falcon and everyone's like, got their tongue on the floor about it. And he's just Ford Falcon. But how about this Datsun 210? And I remember asking him and getting clowned by people saying, yeah, right, that Datsun, that's not going to be worth shit. It'll never be worth anything. It's a Jap car, right? That's what they said. That's a quote. That Jap crap, nah, right? And this is the 80s and mostly white people I'm talking to, so they call Japanese people Japs and nips and shit like that. And that's just was normal. And by the way, just because people don't do it as often, you think those people don't feel it in their hearts and in their minds to still think of people that way? It's out there, right? It's still out there. Anyway, and now if you had a primo clean Datsun 210, man, someone would buy that. Some collector out there is looking, I guarantee, for a Datsun 210. And so now 30 something odd years later, we're starting to see people appreciating some of these vehicles that, like I said, they were getting poo-pooed in the past and all that. All right, so got some more comments. Oh, Mark jumping in. Still got his 86, so it is an 86. He needs to rebuild the LSD, the limited slip differential. That one came with it from the factory, if I am not mistaken. I think some of them did, if it was a factory option, I believe, or maybe a dealer option. I don't know. But he had the limited slip differential on that. Yeah, and they just left it in the freaking church. So if you see one of those sitting in a church, take the time, write down a little note, offer to buy it for like $500, and you might have something that sells at Barrett Jackson for like 30 grand if you clean it up. Oh, he says his is an 85. Yes, it was factory limited slip differential. For those of you that don't know what limited slip differential is, maybe someday we'll have a episode that talks about it, and I'll have my whiteboard and we'll draw pictures. And Mark said, bought it because of me. Yeah, I think I remember he was contemplating whether or not to buy it, and it was like, yeah, we can, whatever it is, we'll fix it. I'll rebuild the whole engine if we have to, you know. And luckily it was just the head gasket we had to do. He bought it for $200. I bet that thing's worth something. Now, I mean, even if you've been drifting it and beating it up, they're getting harder and harder to find. Definitely harder and harder to find. All right. So I've been doing this podcast for quite a while tonight. The next podcast will be on Sunday for the Sunday session. Stay tuned for the time. I don't know. It's probably just going to pop up out of nowhere. So, yeah, I mean, if you can tune in, tune in. If you can't tune in, jump in on the archives. And I just want to thank everyone for participating and joining in. Please be sure to share, like, subscribe, Get some viewers, more viewership, because I think the more people that are commenting, the more dynamic it becomes, more entertaining it becomes, and the more fun it becomes, right? All right. Thank you, guys. I'll be signing off. Bring on some Sep Rock beats, and I will bid you a farewell.
Play a bomb that's less than secret. Play a bomb, play a bomb that's play a bomb that's less than secret. Play a bomb that's less than secret. Play a bomb that's less than secret. Less than secret. Secret. Play a bomb that's less than secret. Play a bomb that's less than secret. Play a bomb, play a bomb that's play a bomb that's less than secret. Play a bomb that's less than secret. Play a bomb that's less than secret. Less than secret. Secret. Secret.